I've got Craig Phillips, who is the bass in the vocal ensemble New York Polyphony, with me today to talk about their new album. Welcome, Craig.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. There are two things that I can always count on when there's a new release from New York Polyphony. That is, it's going to be a journey. I'm going to discover some music that I don't really know very well, or composers I don't know very well. And the performances are just going to be wonderful. And certainly this is a very satisfying album on all of those fronts. Why don't we start with talking about what the album is, the overall concept. It's called And the Sun Darkened, Music for Passiontide. I assume that title speaks to like the death of Jesus, right? And the temple veil ripping apart. Is that where it comes from?
Absolutely. It is music appropriate for the week leading up to Easter. So a lot of the themes are, especially with the compere, they kind of detail the events leading up to, in that case, the crucifixion. And so it would be all works appropriate for that liturgical season, Passiontide.
Well, I mean, here we are a year into the pandemic, and when you hear a title like And the Sun Darkened, you can't help but think, of what everybody has been going through for the past year. But I remember a year ago, we were going into, Holy Week, and we were thinking, is it going to happen? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be, allowable to have people congregate together and to worship in this way? And we had to cancel our services. I mean, I'm speaking from, the Christian liturgical standpoint here. And here we are a full year later, and still there are some elements unknown at this point as we head into Passiontide, as we head into, the ending of Lent and the beginning of Holy Week. Was the pandemic sort of hanging over all of your heads when you were creating this album? Is this something that you could say was actually a side effect for you?
In that we actually recorded this much earlier than this past year, and that proved to be a huge boon for us because, like everyone else, we've been essentially shut down for a year. So this is music that we had toured for a while and really resonated with us. And little did we know what would be looming in the future when we actually assembled this program. As we've been preparing its release, working with our record label and coming up with the artwork and other materials, we have really been struck by how cathartic, how meaningful this music is, especially going back and kind of revisiting the tracks and thinking of the CD sequence. The themes of the music on this disc, for sure, have, let's just say, a different level of meaning after being closed down for a year. All of our performing, I think the last thing that we did was early February 2020. So we've been fortunate to have this recording so we could actually at least participate in hearing our music, and so it's been a journey for sure.
It is music that certainly speaks to the mood of many people, whether they are, associated with the Christian liturgical calendar or not. All of this is music that certainly speaks to our own personal experience, and much of it by Renaissance composers. Let's talk about some of those composer's music. I know you have some more modern works on here as well, and we'll talk about that. But you mentioned Laissez Camper, and he wrote sort of the centerpiece of your recording here. It's the Offices of the Cross. Can you tell us about this particular work?
Absolutely. We have a long and healthy relationship with the Franco-Flemish composers. There's something to their writing style that resonates with us. A lot of the composers in the various generations actually wrote music that was intended for male voices, so we've been able to mine a lot of it without having to take a piece that would, have been intended for a group with a wider stratification of voices and transpose it. So we've found things that are idiomatically, written for our vocal makeup. The compare, our familiarity with his music was pretty limited. We were notified or contacted by a musicologist that works at Columbia University, and this work, was the focus of her research at the time. And she actually contacted us to perform it for her class, to come in and do some selections from this piece. And it is a really fascinating work and very unusual. We, of course, when we prepared this to sing for her students, we took to it immediately. It really just jumped off the page. It matched our voices. It matched kind of the style of singing that we enjoy, and if I may, the kind of style of singing that we're good at. It is a large, I'm going to air quote it a bit, dramatic work that it is believed is intended for private worship. And it was written to accompany the viewing of what is referred to as a book of hours, which at the time there are books of hours that have survived. Highly illuminated, beautifully designed books that detailed the events, kind of like the Stations of the Cross, the events leading up to the crucifixion of Jesus. And the idea was that you would read this book of hours in kind of private worship while this was being sung. So it was kind of high concept multimedia for the Renaissance. And I think as you hear, there's a real kind of dramatic architecture to the work as a whole that in many cases you don't get until generations after compare. We're very familiar with mass settings and the five movements and the material sometimes has great brilliance, but there's no narrative necessarily. And this for sure has a narrative, and so that invites a lot of forward-thinking compositional devices, the colors, the text painting, and it's a tremendous piece of music, and it's as far as we know, we're the first to record it. So we're very happy to be champions of this forgotten masterpiece, really.
Was that a published work in any way, or did you have to dig up the manuscript somewhere?
I believe the score that we were given existed in a scholarly edition, so it was a modern notation. So there have been people who've collected the works of these various Renaissance composers. So it existed, just not in a particularly user-friendly format. As I recall, I believe we did sing from that. And so it was out there. It was known. It wasn't like it was, somebody found it as they were cleaning out their office and went, "Hey, what's this?"
Right.
But it was unknown to us, and we're grateful that it was kind of dropped in our lap.
Well, it's an interesting story how you discovered that and how you were asked to sing it for a class, essentially. I imagine there are lots of different stories swirling behind some of the music that you discover. Maybe talk just briefly about how you found this music, or how you find the works that you want to bring to your performances.
We have kind of varied methods. One of the nice things, and the compere is kind of an example, in our little niche, in our field, we've developed somewhat of a reputation for really being interested in off the beaten path music. So we actually fairly often get contacted by people, enthusiasts, scholars that have been doing their research, and they essentially, I'm not exaggerating, they will email us and say, hey, have you ever seen blah? Often they include PDFs of the works that they've been doing. So that's we're kind of passive beneficiaries of other people's work in some cases. In other cases, we do deep dives into libraries. I mean, there are a lot of there's been a lot of scholarship surrounding the music of this era, and there exists in collected works just thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of music that have not had a performing group invest the time to learn them. Yeah. So there is no shortage of music. There are, I'm sure, many things left to unearth, but there is plenty of music that has been unearthed that has been either neglected or there haven't been the kinds of groups to really do them the justice that they deserve. And as a male group, we've really tried to look for music that was written expressly for men's voices. So that kind of changes the calculus a bit when we go to seek things out.
Exaudi Deus, orationem mea.
Let's talk a little bit about your sound and your musical style, and I bring that up because you have a piece by the composer Andrew Smith on this recording. Andrew Smith, a living composer, Norwegian composer, and you credit him with kind of helping you to find your vocal sound. Can you talk about your association with Andrew Smith?
Absolutely. Andrew is a lovely guy. He's very much here. We kind of consider him an extension of the group because he's been with us since the beginning. On the first disc that we recorded, I think one of the first pieces that we sang as a group was his setting of Veni Redemptor Gentium, which actually appears on our first CD. I believe the association emerged through our countertenor. He was working with the female trio Medieval, and had written some music for them for a concert I believe they did at National Cathedral, and Jeff was part of that. And so I think that's how the association began. But from there, it's almost like his influences and his sensibilities just align perfectly with ours. He's very much an enthusiast for Gregorian chant, so a lot of his music uses that as kind of the let's just say it almost at the molecular level. Mm-hmm. I mean, he will quote chants, he will write in a chant-like style, and through that style of writing, it really challenged us to develop kind of a sensitivity to responding to how we sing as a foursome. And I think because of that connection, Andrew then began to become really familiar with what we do and what we do well, and so he would write music that exploits that. And so it was a kind of a symbiotic relationship. I'm hard-pressed to think of a concert that we have performed in the past 10 years where at least one Andrew Smith piece has not appeared on the program. So
Yeah.
he's extremely valuable, and we hope that he remains in our court as we go forward.
Where did you guys record this album?
This album was recorded in the same location as our previous disc, the Lamentaciones. It is in a deconsecrated priory in New Jersey. It is now kind of a private chapel. It's a cemetery space, but it's right outside of Princeton, and it's as you can hear on the recording, it is a gem. It is kind of a long wooden space, beautifully appointed, with a wonderful decoration. So it's aesthetically, very inspiring to sing there. Big stone altar wall, and so the acoustic is just it's just wet enough. You kind of get the wood warmth in it, and it's really worked well. Prior to this, we recorded a couple of discs ago. Our first exposure to the place was for our Sing the Noel Christmas disc, and we fell in love with it then. We'd intended to return, but it was under renovation, so we were happy to finally get a chance to go back. And I suspect that it will be, it will continue to be a go-to place because it's kind of convenient to our East Coast origins. And
yeah, well, I can imagine that the space you perform in is also sort of an invisible partner, to the sound that you create. So important for a quartet and one that performs music of the Renaissance and a lot of music that has a religious quality to it as well. So I'm just a little curious about that. So now, I know that you didn't write this under the pandemic or with the pandemic in mind, but as we said, it kind of speaks to a lot of the feelings that people have been having, a little bit of the apprehension, but also the hope as we literally are moving into the end of Lent, into Passiontide, into Holy Week. I wonder if there's a track on this recording that you would recommend for somebody who is not familiar with your work to listen to that maybe speaks a little bit to the pandemic experience?
Let's see. It's hard. It's like choosing a favorite child. The final track of the record, the Pierre de la Rue, I think is just exquisite. It's this almost prayerful conclusion to all of this, and I think that the let's just say the sonic signature of the piece is it is very hopeful. I think there's a kind of a beautiful economy to the writing, but it just immediately creates a world that I think is very transporting, and some of our music is there's a simplicity to it that I think people respond to, that it is kind of intrinsically human because it's just four voices in a space, and even if you don't come to it with a religious intent, I think that there's a real meditative quality to it that I think can transcend faiths and approaches, secular, sacred, what have you.
I've been talking with Craig Phillips, who is one of the members of the vocal ensemble New York Polyphony. We've talked a little bit about their new album called And the Sun Darkened, Music for Passiontide. Wonderful collection of works here by well-known composers and new discoveries for me, and I wager for you as well. Craig, I want to thank you so much for spending the time to talk to us about the album. And if folks want to learn more about it, including where to order it, where should they go online?
Pretty much any of your online retailers, the Amazons. We have it's available on streaming services. You know, your Spotify's and YouTube's and Google Play. I think that's what they call it. So it is out there. And if you need additional information, our website is pretty full service. NewYorkPolyphony.com, and there are links to various places. And you can also see when we emerge from the pandemic, when we will be in your neck of the woods performing.
Yeah, and people, you know, if they want to step up and support the group, they can make donations right there, I see on your website as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. Craig Phillips, thanks so much for joining us here on FM 91.
It was my pleasure.